No, you're sharp. Listen to me.
When Lionsgate announced Jafar Jackson would play Michael Jackson in the biopic Michael, the world took notice.
Many months, a couple years of preparation, just allowing myself to...
But few understood the years of preparation, the vocal training, and the dance sessions until his feet bled.
Jafar and I sat down and we talked about Michael. We talked about, we got to get you away from playing your uncle. We got to get you to act.
This is the story of a nephew honoring his uncle's legacy. From his birth into music royalty to becoming the face of one of the most anticipated biopics in cinema history.
I love challenges, and I wanted to prove to myself, my family, and the filmmakers that I can do this.
A Star is Born in Los Angeles. The delivery room at Cedars-Sinai barely registered the quiet arrival of Jermaine Jackson's fifth son that July afternoon. Jafar Jeremiah came into the world with the right surname and the wrong assumption that fame would simply find him. His father had toured continents. His uncle Michael was already reshaping pop music, and Chino offered swimming pools, piano keys, and uncles dropping by with rough mixes. Jafar tried golf at 14 and swung a decent iron, but singing kept interrupting. By 12, he could hold a soulful ballad, and Catherine would stop chopping onions to listen. Neverland wasn't a fantasy kingdom to him. It was where Uncle Mike ran choreography in socks. Those afternoons taught something practical. Performance is repetition, not divine intervention. By 16, the golf clubs had gathered dust, and the microphone had won. Before we continue, take a look at this image found on social media. This dramatic image shows a man who looks like Jafar Jackson giving everything on stage, dressed in a bright fuchsia suit and singing into a microphone with incredible intensity. In the audience, people who appear to resemble Beyoncé, Chris Tucker, and Dwayne Johnson seem completely stunned by what they're witnessing. Beyoncé appears to cover her face while Chris and Dwayne stare toward the stage in amazement. What do you think about the image? Let us know in the comments. The early musical journey. Jafar treated the piano bench like a laboratory at 12, picking out chords by ear and testing his range against Sam Cooke and Marvin Gaye records. He played the same phrases until his fingers ached, then switched to vocal drills. When Living with the Jacksons put cameras in his kitchen in 2015, he stayed quiet during most episodes, preferring the practice room down the hall. He recorded covers of Cooke and Gaye, not for release, but for calibration, mapping his timbre against theirs. Tito's Love One Another video in 2021 gave him a background credit, but Jafar used the set to observe lighting cues and retake etiquette. Those years were unglamorous. Endless scales, mimicry exercises, and a steady rejection of shortcuts. By 22, he had logged thousands of unpaid hours. He had no idea those unglamorous hours were building the exact muscle memory a movie set would soon demand. Debut single, Got Me Singing. Hardy Indigo's production notes for Got Me Singing emphasized brightness, and Jafar agreed. The Latin pop track dropped on June 28, 2019, with a video shot against Rio's painted staircases and ocean views. Brazilian funk rhythms gave the chorus a loose, sun-soaked lift. Jafar co-wrote the hook, aiming for something lighter than his family's typical anthem style. Radio promotion was modest, and streaming numbers remained relatively small. But Jafar treated the release as a diagnostic tool. Could he deliver a complete package without his surname doing all the heavy lifting? The answer came back mostly yes. An album called Famous was discussed and eventually shelved. He didn't mourn it. The single had taught him about mic distance, breath control, and the gap between studio polish and live grit. The album stalled, but his internal compass had recalibrated. The global search for Michael. The audition room in Los Angeles was empty except for a single camera and a folding chair. Jafar walked in, pressed record, and performed a short scene. No costume, no music, just a monologue. 2 years of global searching had narrowed the field to a handful of candidates. But when Antoine Fuqua watched Jafar's tape, he paused and rewound. The physical resemblance was obvious, yet Fuqua fixated on Jafar's hands, how they rested and how they moved when the character spoke. Graham King later noted that Jafar organically embodied the role. When the news broke, Jafar's phone buzzed for hours. 26 years old, 0 feature film credits, and now the world expected him to carry a major Hollywood production. Jermaine's voice on the phone broke through the noise. Prove it. Family endorsement and support. Katherine Jackson praised the casting publicly, saying that Jafar embodied her son. She also called him directly and offered simple advice. You have his eyes. Use them. That phone call carried more weight than any studio memo. Jermaine became a daily presence, watching rehearsal footage through video calls and offering small adjustments, a tilt of the chin, a pause before a line. Jafar even set up a second monitor in his apartment just for his father's feedback. The family's support wasn't abstract encouragement. It was tactical. After an early rough cut, Katherine visited the editing bay. She watched quietly for 20 minutes, then turned to Jafar and said she had momentarily forgotten she was watching her grandson. He nearly broke down. That single sentence erased months of accumulated doubt. He had not merely imitated Michael. He had captured something deeper, and his grandmother recognized it. 2 years of intensive preparation. Jafar started rehearsing before Fuqua even signed on. 2 years alone in a rented studio with a mirror and a laptop. No audience, no feedback, just repetition. He built a library of concert footage, studying not only the moves themselves but the transitions between them. Michael's personal journals became a key resource. One entry mentioned fear, and that single word became Jafar's entry point into understanding the man behind the legend.
From 1962 all the way until 1996.
He cataloged how Michael held a microphone, adjusted his jacket, and breathed between verses while internalizing the emotional core of each scene. That no longer felt like preparation. It felt like inhabiting a space he had already mapped in the dark. Mastering the voice. Jafar isolated Michael's speaking voice from interviews, looping a single phrase, "I love you, thank you," for an entire afternoon. He read newspaper articles aloud in that register, then poetry, then script pages. Singing required a separate routine. A cappella takes were compared against Michael's originals, adjusting vibrato width and attack speed. He placed affirmations on his rehearsal walls, not as decoration but as a daily mental habit, spoken in Michael's cadence until they felt natural. The work wore his vocal cords thin. Some mornings he could barely speak above a whisper. He rested, then resumed. When he finally recorded studio scenes without backing tracks, the sound engineer reportedly asked if Michael's original files had somehow been mixed into the session. Jafar smiled and said nothing. That quiet moment was his private victory. Learning the dance moves. Rich and Tone Talladega stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, watching Jafar run the Motown 25 routine for the 16th time that morning. They had worked with Michael directly. They knew every shortcut and every mistake. Jafar's feet blistered. He taped them and continued. The Talladega brothers pushed beyond simple replication. They demanded fluency, the kind that comes only when the body stops thinking. One afternoon, he collapsed during a spin. His calves seized. He stood back up, shook out his legs, and started again. By the 3rd month, his muscles remembered what his mind had struggled to learn. He could perform a full concert set without stopping, and the choreographers finally nodded. Not praise, just permission to move forward. The Havenhurst immersion. Havenhurst smelled of polished wood, dust, and decades of rehearsals embedded in the floorboards. Jafar trained there for weeks, using the same mirrored room where Michael had perfected routines. He noticed a slight dip in the floor where years of dancers had worn down the boards. He positioned his spins on that exact spot. Jafar incorporated details like these into his daily drills until they became automatic. Crew members who visited noticed a shift in his energy, quieter, more focused, more present. Jafar never called it spiritual. He called it practical. The room taught him economy of motion. Every gesture had a purpose, and he learned to discard the rest. Studying the performances, Jafar built a chronological archive spanning decades. Jackson 5 television appearances, Motown 25, The Bad Tour, The Dangerous Tour, and History. He watched Motown 25 so many times that he could predict camera cuts before they happened. But he also studied rehearsal footage where Michael missed a beat or stumbled during a spin. Those small imperfections revealed the human being behind the legend. Jafar traced the influence of Fred Astaire, noting how Michael borrowed elements of lightness and precision before transforming them into something uniquely his own. The study was daily, obsessive, and often monotonous. He sat in a folding chair with a laptop on his knees, filling spiral notebooks with handwritten observations. Over time, choreography stopped being a collection of steps and became a language. Each performance told a different story. Jafar simply had to learn how to read it. The casting announcement. Fuqua's Instagram post went live on a Thursday morning, and within hours, entertainment outlets around the world had reposted it. The casting team had reviewed actors from multiple countries, yet Jafar's audition carried something difficult to manufacture. He moved like someone who had grown up in the same kitchens, hallways, and rehearsal rooms. Fuqua later said that Jafar sounded like Michael, danced like Michael, and sang like Michael. The world filled in the rest. The announcement made headlines globally. Jafar turned off his phone for 2 days and sat quietly in his apartment, staring at the ceiling and processing the weight of expectations that had suddenly arrived. Filming the biopic. Principal photography stretched across 2024 with Antoine Fuqua overseeing a demanding production schedule. Long takes and performance-driven scenes gave Jafar room to develop the character beyond the musical sequences. Coleman Domingo, Nia Long, and the rest of the cast contributed to an environment focused on authenticity and emotional detail. Jafar performed the dance sequences himself. One demanding routine reportedly required numerous takes across several days. His knees swelled, but he returned to set each morning determined to finish the work. The singing question. Jafar explained publicly that his vocals were blended with Michael's original recordings in certain scenes, while other moments featured his voice more prominently. During studio recording sequences, audiences could hear Jafar's performance with minimal support. The goal was artistic continuity rather than imitation. Some viewers were fascinated by the blend, while others debated where Michael ended and Jafar began. For Jafar, the answer was simple. Months of disciplined practice had created the effect people were hearing. Trailer success. When the first trailer arrived online, it generated enormous attention. Fans analyzed every frame, comparing Jafar's movements and expressions to archival footage of Michael. Rather than celebrating, Jafar reportedly returned to rehearsals. The growing excitement only increased the pressure. His focus remained unchanged: deliver the strongest performance possible. Critical reception. Early reactions to the film were mixed, with critics offering a variety of opinions on the screenplay and storytelling choices. One point of agreement appeared repeatedly. Jafar's performance earned widespread praise. Reviewers frequently highlighted his physical transformation, vocal work, and ability to capture Michael's stage presence. Words such as uncanny appeared again and again. For a first major leading role, the attention was extraordinary. Opening weekend. The film opened to significant public interest, drawing audiences around the world and generating strong box office momentum. Theaters reported packed screenings, and many fans attended specifically to see how Jafar would handle the enormous challenge of portraying one of the most famous entertainers in history. For Jafar, the numbers mattered less than the performance itself. After years of preparation, training, and sacrifice, the work was finally in front of the audience.
Move on beat and everything, but to move like Michael Jackson is a whole other beast.
And the first weekend proved audiences would show up. The harder question was whether they would return for a second viewing. He decided to ignore that question entirely and focus on the next scene waiting to be filmed. Reaching the $1 billion mark. 6 weeks after release, the film's worldwide gross crossed the $1 billion threshold. Domestic earnings surged while international markets continued to drive momentum. For Lionsgate, it represented a historic achievement. For audiences around the world, it confirmed that interest in Michael Jackson's story extended far beyond opening weekend curiosity. Japan, the United Kingdom, and Brazil were among the strongest international markets, helping push ticket sales to extraordinary levels. Jafar reportedly called his father from a hotel room, his voice breaking with emotion for the first time in months. "It's not me," he said. "It's his music." Jermaine answered calmly. "It's both." The achievement carried an additional historical significance. As the film's leading performer, Jafar had become part of one of the most successful biographical films ever released. For him, however, the accomplishment was never just about numbers. It was about honoring a legacy, carrying a family name, and proving that years of preparation, sacrifice, and relentless discipline had not been wasted. The journey that began in rehearsal rooms, dance studios, and long nights of study had finally reached the world stage. And for Jafar Jackson, it was only the beginning.
That was a turning point for me, to have that space to be able to do that.
He didn't frame the certificate. He kept it in a drawer. The number was staggering, but he believed the achievement belonged first to Michael's music and legacy. His role had been to honor that memory and bring it to a new generation of audiences, becoming the highest-grossing biopic. By the end of its theatrical run, Michael had surpassed every biographical film that came before it. Productions that once dominated the genre now sat behind it in the final box office rankings. International markets accounted for a large share of the film's success, highlighting Michael Jackson's enduring popularity across cultures, languages, and generations. Industry analysts and studio executives took notice as the numbers continued to climb. The film had become more than a commercial success. It had become a global cultural event. Throughout the milestone celebrations, Jafar remained characteristically reserved. While headlines focused on records and revenue, he limited himself to brief interviews and measured public appearances. The attention never seemed to change his perspective. For years, his focus had been the work itself. The rehearsals, the vocal training, the endless hours spent studying performances and refining details. The box office records were a result of that effort, but they were never the goal. The goal had always been to honor one of the most influential entertainers in history and tell his story with respect, authenticity, and care.
Filmmakers and myself and my family, that I can get to that point where I can...
He knew the credit belonged first to Michael, second to Fuqua, and third to the crew. His own contribution came somewhere after that. That perspective didn't discourage him. It freed him from the burden of believing he alone was responsible for the film's success. Audience response. Leaving sold-out screenings, audiences continued discussing the film long after the credits rolled. Social media filled with reactions, memories, and personal stories from viewers of different generations. Late at night, Jafar occasionally scrolled through the messages. Many weren't critiques of his performance at all. They were stories. Parents introducing their children to Michael Jackson's music. Longtime fans sharing memories of concerts they had attended decades earlier. Families rediscovering albums together. Those reactions mattered most to him. They weren't evaluating technique or choreography. They were expressing gratitude for reconnecting with an artist whose work had shaped their lives. Cultural impact of the film. Following the release, interest in Michael Jackson's music surged across streaming platforms and social media. New audiences discovered classic songs, while longtime fans revisited albums they had not heard in years. Short-form video platforms filled with dance recreations, performance comparisons, and tributes inspired by both Michael's original work and Jafar's portrayal. Record stores reported renewed interest in Michael Jackson's catalog, and discussions increasingly focused on the artistry behind the music, the songwriting, vocal arrangements, production choices, and groundbreaking choreography that helped redefine pop culture. The film had become more than entertainment. It had reopened a global conversation about one of music's most influential performers. A sequel in development. With the success of the first film, discussions about a follow-up project began almost immediately. The story still had many chapters left to explore, including some of the most iconic periods of Michael Jackson's career. Industry reports suggested interest in examining later tours, creative milestones, and the evolution of Michael's artistry during the decades that followed. Jafar's involvement remained a subject of discussion rather than certainty. He wanted time. The first film had required years of preparation, physical commitment, and emotional investment. Any continuation would demand the same level of dedication. Rather than rushing into another production, he focused on reflection, preparation, and understanding the next stage of the story. The mirror in the rehearsal room was still there. And so was the music. Jafar Jackson didn't simply step into his uncle's shoes. He earned every moment on screen through years of discipline, study, sacrifice, and relentless practice. Countless rehearsals, vocal sessions, dance training, and the support of an entire family helped shape a performance that captured the attention of audiences around the world. More importantly, it introduced a new generation to Michael Jackson's legacy. The box office numbers, headlines, and industry recognition were remarkable achievements. But perhaps the film's greatest success was something far simpler. It reminded millions of people why Michael Jackson's music continues to resonate across cultures, languages, and generations. And for a brief moment, Jafar Jackson became the bridge between that legacy and the future.